You ready?
Even better. Yeah, sounds good.
So let it be written. So let it be done. This is Tabletop Terrors. How's everybody doing on a Sunday? We're going to do some world building. We've got some kooky ideas we're going to throw around. And please participate. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. Feel free to join in on the fun and the world building. So James, how you doing today?
Pretty good. Yeah, not bad at all today. Love a good world building. Love some brainstorming. So I think that'll be fun. We don't always get to just hang out and talk about what we want to talk about. So I think this will be really cool. I really like getting a chance to do that.
Same. Hey, Blake, you are first. Gabe does stuff. Hello.
There's also that helpful guy we
already know.
We already know him. He's helpful.
Fantastic.
You've seen him around.
Imagine It Better says hello. Is that you?
Yeah, I can't. I need 100 subscribers before I can change my URL. But yeah, I just did it. I was just being because it's a whole thing.
What is going on, everybody?
How's it going? What's up?
That's fantastic.
So what did you want to brainstorm today, Tim? You codenamed this stream something.
I call it a codename. It's really a working title, but Carrion.
And the difference is important. And the difference will surprise you.
Number 3 will be the best. No, that wasn't even a good one. No, what I was saying is, that helpful guy you already know says this is going to be beautiful, but I'm still at work.
Oh, no. I'm sorry.
So
you have to work.
the whole pitch is that I wanted to do something set in the modern world. A while back, we were talking about running mecha hack games, and I had this idea for more scaled down, almost like exosuits. So they can be of, varying sizes. Haven't figured that out yet, but at least as big as Master Chief in Halo, but probably bigger because I want it to be... Yeah, we'll figure that out. But so it's more scaled down like exosuits. And the difference is that I wanted it to take place in our modern world, and I feel like it was a cool twist, a cool change. Rather than aliens invading or rather than there being some outside threat, what if the quantum fabric of reality itself mutated and got an infection? And then that started to spread like an infection, like a virus, and then started to leak into our world. There are obviously bigger ramifications if that's happening in the universe, so I kind of was thinking that maybe it's just happening on our world for now. So it's less of a space sort of thing, it's modern times, but if the quantum fabric of reality started to become infected, what would that look like? And these mecha suit would have the capabilities of somehow trying to right the wrongs of this sickness. Now, it would still be fighty, shooty, like mecha action, because the way that I imagine this happening, and I know I haven't really done much research at all on like viruses and infections and some of those things, but like I know how like white blood cells attack a virus and things like that. Almost imagine these mecha as like white blood cells. Like they have to like wipe off the infection, and they have to stop what would effectively be the fabric of reality rotting, warping, shifting. And so, so that's kind of the high concept pitch. And so, I figure, I don't know if you want to just shoot questions at me or if you want me to throw stuff at you.
That's a good point. So I think, well, okay, somebody asked in the chat, when, like 2035? Gabe Does Stuff had a few questions, but that was their next one. So like what time? You said modern times. What time period are you thinking?
I'm thinking like today, like this is happening in our real world.
So not 2035,
no,
about
I kind of think
14 years before that.
I think it's kind of scarier. Yeah. I think it's kind of scarier if this is happening now.
Yeah, right. I like that. It could be happening literally right now because people, I think, don't know about it based on the things you've said, right? Normal people aren't aware or if they are, maybe it's not. Oh, I forgot. We went back and forth on this, right? Where did we land?
Yeah, so this is
what
kind of
did normal people think about it?
This is kind of where I was thinking. I think the way that you worded it, we were going back and forth in voice messages, and I think that you worded it really well. Can they fly? Gabe does stuff. Some of the suits can fly if you choose those options, for sure. Hey, what's up, person? Hello.
Hey, person's here.
So the way that I think that this would happen is it is attempted to be kept secret. So they're attempting to keep this a secret. But the way you worded it, James, was absolutely brilliantly, and I like this, and I locked this in my head. It is a conspiracy theory to many who think it's crazy. Some believe it, and almost no one can prove it.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it's a little bit like Aliens in the X-Files.
Exactly. That's
where
a perfect...
Like, well, the show, we're here to prove whether it exists or not, and like some people are there like, no, of course not. And then some people have seen it firsthand. So whether there's evidence of it or not, some people say, well, I saw it, with my own eyes.
Right, exactly. Hey, what's up, AJ Phillips?
What's up, AJ?
That's my boy from my home group.
Oh, awesome. Very cool.
So here's what I was thinking. So the concept that I liked, because I'm trying to subvert these tropes. So what I'm trying to do is, we have seen organizations like this. We have seen like Evangelion. So you have like anime and things where robots are set to fight. In that case, it was like angels, like those crazy apocalyptic.
Yeah, I can suddenly draw even more. You mentioned Ava before in voice messages, but I can draw even more parallels now between this and Ava, which is really interesting. And because do you remember what would happen when an angel showed up? They'd like clear the city. There were alarms. And even the city, I think, had like, it would shift like physically. Now, again, this is obviously public. These things would show up. But I believe that these things were a result of something humans had done. I haven't seen Ava in a long time, but I wanted to throw out that I'm like, this is similar in a way. There's an organization that for some reason has to fight these things that, who cares why it's happening? It is, so somebody's got to take care of it.
So this is something that I was going to mention. And so how about this? I liked the idea that it was actually not a government organization only, that there are maybe a few different organizations that know about this. And one of the ones that intrigued me the most, that seemed like it just felt like a cool spot in the lore, an interesting, like, oh, I'd like to explore that because we haven't seen that explored really in this way, was some sort of a tech giant. So like, imagine if Apple or Google or Elon Musk started showing like, and this is the new Elon Musk Exo such and such a suit. You know what I mean? Like, now they wouldn't because it was secret, but
that's what I didn't consider. But I see what you're saying. They wouldn't show it off, but the idea is still valid, where it would be tech giants doing it. People with a lot of money and seemingly nothing else to do.
Right. And so there are a few things that that I thought was interesting about this. I don't know all the ramifications of this, but I'm going to research it. Why does Elon Musk get to just go into space?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm guessing it's because no one has ever tried to do it as a civilian, so there are no laws in place because no one said, hey, we better make a space law.
Well, yes, and in a sense, because there are some laws. I'm not an expert, right? But I'm sure that he has to clear it with air traffic control in whatever area, or have a cleared area.
Sure.
But I know what you mean. Like, he launched a car into space, and in a sense, the world more and more is learning that, yes, we have rules, but sometimes somebody tries something first and we make rules later because of the things they
did. That's how I feel this is.
And this is those cases where you're like, this is uncharted territory.
Exactly.
Is the important part.
So I feel like one of their scientists, figured out this is what's going on. So they started doing tests. They started, probably developing some sort of a suit. And then that became, knowledge that maybe the government got a hold of. And then the government said, well, similarly to how they almost tried to, they tried to shut down Tesla. And he's like, hey, I'll give you all my electric car technology. And you use it in your cars.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, I feel like the government would come and say, hey, we're going to shut you down. And then he's like, or they're like, hey, we'll you can have the suit technology, but you just can't stop us from doing what we're doing, our research.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were like, okay. So I like to imagine there's at least two organizations. One is, like I said, this tech startup, not startup, a tech giant that has a program. And the other one is more like military. Someone said like lasers or guns. Absolutely.
And I wanted to throw something out to everybody that's here. We are just brainstorming something that we are eventually going to create, right? I wanted to make it clear that Tim has an idea of what he wants, but we are making things up and creating on the fly. We're just going back and forth and saying, what about this? What about that? So I wanted to point that out because this is something that not only you can take part in, alone or with other people, basically, but this is what it looks like for us to make stuff, and I just wanted to throw that out there that we're just hanging out making stuff, and it's cool that people can hang out too. So if you have questions or something comes up, please continue throwing stuff out. It's so cool. But I just wanted to throw that out there for anybody that we have a few people that I don't think usually join us. So I wanted to put it out that, yeah, we're just doing what we do and making stuff, so.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great way to put it. And so what's the problem? The problem is the particles that make up the universe. So the quantum foam, the atoms, the everything, all of this that exists that makes up anything you can interact with in the world. And even then some other things such as like time and gravity and all this stuff they're growing uncontrollably and like spreading to different parts. So like gravity is messing with time, is messing with the dirt, is messing with the concrete, is messing with the air. So it's like this crazy. So what I'm imagining is, just for now, I'm going to paste in place something so that we can have a reference point, almost like the upside down in Stranger Things.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
but it actually spreads. So a pustule, quote unquote, of this would like erupt, and I imagine it would be, say, like a patch of earth or something that's just really gnarly and strange, and then it would just keep growing and growing. But from
like
that,
a wound, literally,
like a wound,
you could get infected, and yeah.
Yes, but see, the thing I think that would be terrifying is this doesn't have to act like a regular virus that spreads. It could just start erupting here, and then now this is, and then all of a sudden in this area, there are all these pockets of destroyed reality.
Yeah, and so let me put that in how I see it, right?
Sure.
Whether it's helpful for other people or just to get a better concept, get a better idea of it. What it sounds like you're saying is, though we perceive all matter as being all matter, in a sense, there is something else tying things together, and that is what's causing these things to happen.
Yes.
Right? It's a hard perspective to have, to imagine something outside of all existing matter.
Right, exactly.
But that's the idea, is like, yes, just like in your body, being sick can make your nose runny and your stomach hurt, and they're not directly connected, but they're coming from they're symptoms of the same problem.
Symptom is the exact word I was trying to think of. Not everything is, but I couldn't think of how to say it. Not everything is directly the sickness, but there are a lot of symptoms.
There we go. Exactly. And that's what it sounded like, where it was like it's happening and people can relate those things to each other, those events, but they maybe can't figure out what's going on, or that's part of the story,
And so there would be creatures, I think. I thought it's like a grandiose thing to claim, but I thought there hasn't been a new creature type invented in a while. What I mean is, the last big one that I can remember that was like, oh, that's a new kind of threat, was zombies. Where no one had really thought, oh, a person can come back and that's terrifying. But outside of creating an alien creature, I haven't seen, and maybe I'm wrong and you can prove me wrong, but like in terms of archetypical monster types, there haven't been.
Yeah, because really, I think that's what's important, is zombification is almost a concept, right? The reason that became so popular is because it's like one step away. I don't know how exactly, right? Sure. There's a lot to be said there, but it's like most zombies eat brains. Right? If you think about it, zombieism is something that when people look at, if you say they're zombies, I have questions. Do they eat brains?
Sure.
Do they walk slowly? And there's something about
execute them by hitting them in the head.
Exactly, right? Like there's like a list. It's the same with ghosts in some way. So I see what you mean, but it's like this other type of being, that I don't know. It's so difficult to unpack and reverse engineer zombies, right? Or we'd have so many things like it in that sense. But I do see what you mean. It's like an analog to what zombies are, where it's like, oh, but and you know what's funny? I didn't say this in voice messages. One thing it reminded me of, the only thing I've ever heard like this, and it's still not even quite like it, is the Langoliers. Do you remember the plot of that?
Yes. Okay.
When you originally described, my first thing was like, oh my gosh, it's very Langoliers. That's what I was imagining.
So, spoiler alert, just so that if you haven't seen or read the Langoliers, mute it for about 30 seconds.
Not a recent film, yeah.
Not at all. Essentially, there are these creatures that eat time that has passed. And so there is a plane full of people that get stuck about, I don't know, we'll say 10 minutes in the past or whatever. And these things eventually but because they're stuck out of time, things like batteries can't work, matches don't work because none of the time works. So that's a really cool...
Like it had so many of the themes that were like, oh, they're like something's wrong with reality kind of deal.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen that movie in so long, but that was one.
Yeah. The concept is better than the execution, in my opinion. But
I completely agree. That's what's interesting. Is it is only like very barely related to that idea, and I love that idea. But it is like it was brand new, so I can't blame them. But yes, nowadays the bar is a little higher. Where I'm I would want more from that kind of story.
Same.
But somebody mentioned. Sorry, Gabe does stuff. Just this was a while ago. But they said, what if they get tech from a universe that's already infected? So that question has in it a lot of stuff. I didn't know where you were going to go, but soon what I wanted to talk about was I'm realizing at some point we should start gamifying this so that we can decide what you're comfortable with as far as variation. And that's a very broad phase. I didn't know where you wanted to go. If you had something, please continue. But I feel like I'm ready to address the infected tech, if you are.
Yeah, so the one thing I was going to mention is the reason that I wanted to call it Exo-Carrion. So Carrion is basically the carcass of an animal that other animals pick at. So the carrion is like vultures eat carrion. Like, you know what I mean? It's like...
Yeah, it's like another word for flesh that animals eat, basically.
Yeah.
It's like...
And so the concept that I thought, the reason why I wanted to call Exo-Carrion is the only way to combat this is effectively like using that weird quantum mutation in a controlled way to create the mecha. Because a virus will never attack itself.
Yeah.
So you can't use so much of it, and maybe that's a mechanic where it's like you increase the carrion levels, which makes it so that you're easier. Like, basically the idea is I loved the concept of needing to use the weird twisted stuff in your tech. Yeah, and the volatility of that and how it would affect people so that you weren't immediately wiped out.
Exactly, because what's funny is my response to the question was going to be, they're definitely going to have to use some of at some point, somebody's going to incorporate it. So it's even better that at the root, it's like, no, they were forced to. That's the secret that these big companies might give to the government. Hey, the only way you can combat these things is by using it, like that's one of the things, and carrion is specifically dead flesh.
Right. And so the idea is that the reason why it's called Exo-Carrion is because it's the dead flesh of reality that you're wearing as a suit. Luke? I just love that idea.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up, Luke? Doing great, man.
How's everyone doing? Yeah, we're doing great. We're talking about Exo-Carrion. Tim is talking about a world that we're creating.
So Ben specifically said, and here's the thing. That's the exact word I was using internally, but I didn't want to trigger anybody. That's just a hot button topic.
It's a hot button topic.
That's exactly, Ben, that is literally what I was doing. I was researching how vaccines work. And I was saying, like, the vaccine versus virus, where the vaccine is derived from the virus. And it's like, I don't know enough about it. But, like, I thought it would be, it's a little more, like, it's a little more dark. But I think it comes with a risk where I think being part of that, having that stuff on you, eventually affects you. Like you can't be a pilot in one of these mecha and it not affect you.
So Blake asks if these are like biosuits. We haven't really talked a ton about the suits. I have sort of an idea. I think you have an idea. I don't think they're full biological, right? But in the same respect, that's why I brought up the gamification because, well, I suppose we can go into that. But the idea is at some point, when I said, earlier I said I wanted to start gamifying it to see what you were comfortable with, because in my mind, I'm now imagining these more like spy agencies. They just have so much in common with a spy agency. They have a lot of money. They do things secretly. They fight for different contracts. It's the same kind of thing. You have a job that you can't tell anybody about. You have a cover. You potentially have a cover life. You can't, like all these parallels, right? The thing is, I guess this was a world building. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to stop myself. The important thing is I now have a slightly different paradigm that I'm working on with games where, and I think you might actually agree with this, there should be an end goal to playing this game. Not even that there has to be, but let's explore that real quick. The idea is eventually you want to go in and stop this from happening, right?
Right.
But I say that because now I'm imagining a game where it's like, well, the game is being one of these people, right? Imagine being an XCOM agent.
Sure.
But at first, you're just an agent. You go and you shoot the aliens they tell you to shoot. But then eventually you start to see more of like it unfolded. You go a little deeper than anyone's gone and you see something that you can't unsee, and you like the story starts to become about how you now have to go to this other reality. And then what you mentioned, now you're balancing the levels of how much of the other realities, like stuff can you take, your own Carrion levels versus your like humanity levels. I don't know, right? Just pit it against something else immediately to make a cool spectrum. But so I just now have I'm imagining all these different, I say all these, but let's say at least 3 different organizations where you're like, well, this is the one that's kind of bio. And this is the one that like is science, but uses guns the most. And this is the one like and Mad Max, when they have the 3 places, there's Bullet Farm and other place. Like they're very specialized organizations. And the mecha from that group has those types of things. Not even that it's like, only they can use this, but it's more like, no, they're the ones that are often taking on this type of mission. Because then that just you can imagine that there's all different ways that it is implemented, and some people are better at some missions.
Well, and the really cool thing you can look at in our history is you can look at how different weapons developed in World War II, for instance. So like there were German tanks, American tanks. They were like, and you could see how everyone had different engineers working on different stuff, and they took the idea of a tank
and different capabilities,
exactly. And this tank was really good, but it had this weak spot because of the engineering, or this one was dead in the water and you could shoot this one's treads out. And it's like, I think leaning on that, where it's like everyone starts with the same root technology, but then it explores the concept that people are people and ideas are ideas, and this group of scientists is going to make a different thing than this group of scientists. The one of the examples I was using was, I can't say that the tech people like the Google or the Elon Musks wouldn't weaponize things, but the military's goal would probably be to weaponize this, wound in reality as much as possible. Because like, how convenient would it be to be able to wipe out a whole region of insurgents, right? Where you're I just erase it from reality and then I fix reality. Like, you know what I mean?
And so what that says to me though is immediately I go, okay, well, that you couldn't do that or it makes the problem worse. That wouldn't stop somebody.
Right.
But it would stop it from being viable. That would mean that somebody would have to go outside of the normal stuff to do it. Right? You have a villain now that's erasing people from reality.
Right. So anyway.
But yes, I absolutely. But that idea that like you said, starting out with the same root technology, but if one goes into a specific type of anomaly a lot, their gear would support that more. And they would know what to expect, but things are not always as you expect,
Right.
And their suits might work a little bit different, and they might, All of that aside, like you said, the balance. I like the idea of the suit being something that you manage, separate that you manage. Like you're going into these places, you have these different things, you have a different amount of this energy in you, whatever, Maybe it slowly mounts as you are there. I think you kind of alluded to something like that, where there's a timer on this sort of thing, where somebody even said in the chat, so too much of the tech can hurt the user or their mind, things like that, where it's like too much or too long exposure, or like this is, even when people are in space, they come back, right? And they might have bone density problems because they didn't use their bones very much. It's just like that.
So,
but like turn it up to 11 and break the knob off,
And break the knob off. I want to answer real quick. Luke is in the chat.
Yeah, right.
And Luke just says, hey, I'm starting to write my own campaign for D&D. Any tips? I'll give you a very high-level piece of advice. Make sure you have what's called a session 0 with your players. That is like the number one thing. And it's like, without going too far off on what exactly that means, I'm going to share a link to our playlist where we cover this whole thing. And it's important to make sure that the players are on the same page as you is really the deal. That is the number one mistake that most GMs make, is they write a story and then they hand it to the players, and the players are like, I didn't want to do this story.
Yeah, right. It's a setting of expectations among everybody at the table, so that you don't go off writing a campaign that people aren't interested in playing, or at the very least that they didn't expect to be playing. Because sometimes it's just that you are expecting a romantic comedy, you get an action, or vice versa, and it's just that can be jarring. It can make something that would otherwise be fun not as much fun. But very good tip, I think. Great.
And Gabe, it's got definitely a little Rick and Morty, probably less flippantly comedic. You know what I mean? Where it's like, but yeah,
in my opinion, the thing that we've taken from Rick and Morty, really what I feel like that's saying is Rick and Morty is one of the best sci-fi anthologies on TV today. Outside of the cultural jokes and stuff it makes, it has some of the most novel and interesting ideas sometimes. And because of the style of show they've crafted, they can just like sneak it in.
Yeah.
Where there's a whole world of gear people and they don't have to explain it. They just get to make jokes about it, And so in a little bit in games, we get to do that. And so, yes, like in a sense, it's very good to hear that because we're banking on those same patterns kind of.
Right. And so, and you're very welcome, Luke. Person says, so they can wipe out regions with it, but then they have to figure out how to clean it up. So much like other government testing of things like in the past when they've used like Agent Orange and different things, they're trying. But I like to think that they're probably doing more damage than good right now. Because they're trying to weaponize. So they have a whole department of people who are trying to figure out how to control it. But I don't think anybody knows how to control it yet. So this is a lot like chemical warfare, but it's just like quantum warfare.
And I'm imagining the other tech giants that might be getting into this, the non-government agencies, would be saying, hey, don't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, this is bad. Don't do it.
Exactly.
Don't do it. And the government would say, we're not doing it.
We're not. And then they are. And then there's a cleanup site you need to go.
And some of the contracts that these companies would get would be from the government saying, oh, another one popped up. And you would find some clues there going, oh, I see. Exactly. It would be like going to the scene of a fire and going, well, what's all this kerosene doing here?
Well, these gas cans marked US
right.
military. No, so let's talk about a couple of things. For now, as a placeholder to just figure out the brainstorming, I'm considering making this a hack of the mecha hack. So just obviously that can change drastically. We could write our own rules. It could become a board game. But for the sake of talking to you about the gamification of it, the pilot and the chassis would still exist. That concept where you have a mech type and then you have a pilot type. But I wanted to come up with interesting and like unique things that the pilot types could be. So like as an example, I didn't want it to just be people who were brave and who had like good skill with aiming and things like that. So I thought it would be cool if it was like, I'm just going to throw out some notes that I have jotted down. So I don't know if this is really what I'm going to do, but like one pilot type would be someone who has, let's say, their amygdalas, the center of the brain that shows you about like fear and stuff like that, they're eroded or don't work. So there's this really like crazy, like fearless pilot. And so they're able to interact with the Carrion in a different way than say someone who
they have a physical advantage in a sense.
In this way, they're able to maybe take on more Carrion without it affecting them. And then maybe you have somebody who is extremely creative. And because of that, the way that the Carrion interacts with their brain, they're able to imagine these things and then help make them a reality. So like, it's more of like brain types, like different types of brains, like maybe people who are hyper good at math or have an eidetic memory. Like, I don't know. I just thought it'd be really interesting to have different pilot types that have different, and whether it's the brain or not, I just wanted it to be like a unique thing, not just shooty, burly soldiers climbing into mechs, blowing stuff up.
That's fair. I suppose we can go to the chat a little bit, but I want to discuss the concept you're talking about a little bit. But so Gabe does stuff. What about tech protests as a side enemy? So there would be. That's what something Tim mentioned earlier was that this is everybody's trying to keep this under wraps. So a protest would happen, but it would probably look different than you imagine, right? It wouldn't be big. It would be a group of people that even the people on the road walking by would be like, look at these crazies talking about the aliens.
Yeah.
Right? Like I want to really...
The world is sick.
Exactly. Like I want to drive that point home. They might look at these people like a cult, the people that believe these are the things that are happening. Whether or not, as a part of the story, these things should be obvious to people. Doesn't matter.
Right.
And then, Blake and Gabe both said a board game of this would be amazing. A board game would be amazing. This would be a game, I think. It's funny because I know what you mean when you say board game, but if you would enjoy a board game of this, I'm confident that you would enjoy a role-playing game of this. And as far as I know, that's what Tim plans to make. So at the very least, I suppose I'm saying if having said that you would enjoy a board game of this, keep your mind open to trying the role-playing game of it when it comes out, even if role-playing games aren't usually your thing. But what you're saying about the pilots, what I'm realizing is the pilot is going to be the person the character is playing.
Yes.
And so it's going to be a part of character creation. The thing is, this is something, I'm trying hard not to hand wave it, but follow me here.
Sure.
This is something that would be good to leave to the player because there are so many options. And what you're saying is you're choosing the reason you're special and a pilot.
Yes.
And I think that that's a perfect thing for somebody to come up with, right? We would give examples or something, but in a sense, if it's not mechanical directly, the reason, right? You could say that this type of pilot is a plus, whatever, right? But this narrative reason is like, oh, my creativity is what allows me to do it.
Sure.
That broadness might be good at a character level. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so what do you think about that? Like,
so, and that's kind of, it's funny you say that because you actually broadened it even more, which I think is helpful. That's why, because at one point I was like, all of these pilots have one thing in common. And I realized it's really boring. So what's
right?
special?
Yeah.
Like, it's the way their brain interprets things. So absolutely. And I'm open to that. And that's kind of where it's like, I'm trying to find the level of specificity, like what is it, so that they can have. So I'll give you an example. If, for whatever, because we can do this, and these machines can do whatever we want, if you're more creative, the mecha is more powerful because of the way that your brain works, because the way that the patterns of your mind works.
Yeah.
That is the thing. So in this example, like you're saying, one of the pilot types would be creative. That's the fuel that you put inside of this crazy machine, the Exo Carrion.
Okay, yeah.
That lets it do things. Then you decide how you're creative.
Yeah, like how does you chose creative, so you have to show me how that works in the game. Like you're creative, so and we would allow, like it would be a lens in a sense.
Correct.
That's different for each person.
Because you can say, like, and just think about this. There are, I'm certain, patterns with a creative person that create a Venn diagram across creatives of the same type. So there's probably certain...
Well, and we can talk about that a little bit. There was a study done that said that people are generally more creative, and I think it is often a marker of high intelligence, the more disparate concepts you can relate. In my opinion, much of creativity is figuring out how to relate such disparate concepts. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a world where reality was sick and you had these things that had to go fight it? That's the easy part. The hard part is linking those together to make it cool, right? That's the creativity. So in a sense, there are a lot of ways, but like that's one example is like you can think outside the box. You are not often constrained by what's around you. That's creativity, in a tactical sense, sort of. And then sort of what you were saying about I was imagining it from like a Lovecraft standpoint, where it's like, and you can perceive better the unrealistic things, like in a literal sense that you see there. You know, it's like you can take it. It's not just about being the power of the suit. It's like you are mentally different in a way that allows you to go, I see what you're doing, but my knowledge of it allows me to keep a handle on it. Like, it should be a virus for my brain, but I'm able to kind of like keep it at bay, you know?
And so exactly. So it's both and. There are people who are able to face the horrors of it, but like,
okay, yeah.
But also, I thought it was super interesting to me that the way your brain works charges a quantum weapon.
Okay,
so
yeah.
Your brain patterns, your emotions, the person you are, your personality, when added to this exocarrion, creates a special thing. And there are different exocarrion shells. So like chassis that are...
Yeah, right, exactly.
That are made for certain things. And I don't know, like I was thinking one could be like more based around like... not literal, because again, it's a very...
I don't know if you're doing this, but can I remind you of something you should be doing?
What?
Tell me what the toys would look like.
Well, so that's where I still haven't figured out. That's what I wanted to do with the world building. I still haven't figured out the exact thing that I'm in love with. There are a lot of things that I love. I love that it's like a Google-like company. I love that the quantum reality is sick and that's what's causing it. Like all that stuff. This little bit is the first blob where I'm like, I don't know what the toys would look like yet, because I feel like I want to do something that's a little off kilter.
Let me put it this way. That's fair. Let me put it this way, though. Still consider that there'll be toys in the sense that there will be many of the same scale. There will be many of which there are sort of variants of. They will have similar things on both sides that are slightly different. You see what I mean? I agree. Yeah. We want to find it, but I just like... I want to bring the full context of toys to you.
Sure. And that's so to be funny, the whole thing was inspired, and we'll go to the chat in a second. The whole thing was inspired, like I was like, I want to make Exo Squad.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. Great, yeah.
Blake.
So it is Exo Squad.
Holy jinx. Yeah, I promise you. So yeah.
That's so funny.
So yes. So that's what I imagine, Exo Squad. Whereas like everyone's got like a slightly different thing. Real quick, I want to answer some of these questions in the chat. Gabe Does Stuff says 2021 and it starts in a tavern, which is perfect. Talking about like, when does it happen? What would happen if someone person says, what would happen if someone delusional entered a suit? I love that.
Oh yeah. Like if you entered a suit and didn't have this special thing that is making these other pilots work, you would get in this suit. I don't know. Yeah. Right. Yeah, there would be a roll table of effects. Your mind might melt.
Right.
You know,
or you might damage reality further. Like that's,
that's you really might cool. Become I think there's a lot there, but that's a great question because that would but those types of interactions with the type of brain you have, that's cool.
I was also toying with like kind of like maybe modeling things a little more after like Green Lanterns, where it's like different emotions and different like amplifications of emotions and
it's interesting. I have extreme preferences to things like that, and I think there are very fine lines to walk, and so I think I'm excited for that. That's conversation.
The thing. I'm looking for that thing where I'm like flipping through the Rolodex of like, could it be emotions? Maybe. Could it be brain types? Maybe.
And that's where I'm like,
maybe. I haven't found anything that I'm like, that's it. And I know I will.
And that's why, I think there's a middle layer where players will get to choose theirs, and what they choose changes their game. Kind of what we're talking about, but there's more details we need to figure out. But like.
Right?
Yeah.
And so Blake says, wouldn't the different entities pick different types of pilots to interact with different types of mechs? Yes, and since it's a game, I want to make it so that it doesn't necessarily mean that this pilot goes in this mech. So we don't want to create the game version of what we're doing of like, you want to be the elf so you can have the high dex to be a ranger.
Yeah. To put it another way and give the context, as Tim pointed out earlier, it's going to be like this game our publisher makes called Mecha Hack, Absolute Tabletop. And it's a role-playing game of mechas, but there are rules in it. But specifically, you choose a pilot and a chassis. And these things can be put together in all different ways on purpose to increase the amount of customization options. So I like that idea, but in a sense, we're saying no to that idea specifically so that we can have more unique options.
Yeah, this is actually really clever meta. Like, Gabe does stuff. This is so smart. What if one of the characters is actually into role-playing games?
I read that and I wasn't sure if they meant in the game, but if they did,
so I think they mean like it. Well, dude, can you imagine the RPGs you could play in a
I
quantum
see what
suit?
you mean.
Like,
that's their secret thing. No, okay, that is an amazing idea, Gabe. I didn't understand what you meant, but I see now. That's their thing that powers their suit. You're saying, like, it's not creativity; it's their love of role playing games.
Right,
so
right.
So that now manifests.
Because I'm trying to think
amazing.
too of like what could be the yeah. Because to be clear, again, this is more like the human is like the battery that powers the suit in a way.
Yeah.
So how that human, it's like an ingredient. You can have a lot of different things you're going to put into a soup, but the protein is really kind of going to make that soup different.
Oh yeah.
So
like there
protein
are ingredients that are more important than others.
Yeah, like I could get away with putting a certain kind of stock and different vegetables, and I could swap out 3 or 4 different proteins, and it's going to be a different soup.
Yeah.
And arguably, is it the best soup? No. But that's what I'm trying to say is, like, I can't figure out. I don't know. That's what I was kind of trying to do on this stream, is figure out, like,
okay, and yeah.
One thing I want to make super clear, too, it is still going to be, like, shooty and fighty, just maybe a little different. So, like, maybe they will use bullets, but I'll probably just take everything and twist it a degree off. Hey, what's up, Jonathan? He said, what I miss. We're just brainstorming.
I could recap. Yeah, I was going to say I'll recap a little based on, because so we have been talking about this concept for a game, Jonathan, that Tim that we're creating, that Tim is coming up with, called Carrion, and it is a game where reality is sick. There's a lot here, but I'm going to rush through this quickly to get to what we're about to talk about. Reality is sick, and there are these companies that have developed these suits. Think a little bit like the Upside Down in Stranger Things, as far as, like, there's a big hole and people go in it and it's scary. Like, I don't know, not directly, but there are, like, effectively companies of mercenaries, in a sense, that go try to help these things because reality is sick. And if it gets worse, everybody will be dead. But they have to keep it a big secret, right? Kind of government / big tech conspiracy in the modern world. I don't know.
Yeah,
hopefully that helps. And I'm going to read the text real quick. Blake Barker says, well, I would think that different entities would have different chassis and pick different pilot types based on that. That doesn't mean that they would have to. Oh, okay. The important thing, Blake, is I see what you mean. You're saying entities, I think, and you're like likening that to organizations when I mentioned earlier. And I do see what you mean. In my opinion, the type of entity that you're choosing would decide the type of mission you're doing or what types of abilities you have. Like, so I think I see what you mean. You're saying, like, well, there would be, like, default options, like this one has this. I don't know. I think.
Yeah, he's saying, like, hey, the military is going to have soldiers. The other people might have scientists. And the military, and I agree. But the military will also have scientists, and the other side will also have combatants. But one might be more trained and more specialized than the other.
Exactly. Everybody has a navy, but somebody's got the best navy. Like, yeah.
Right.
But basically, in my opinion, what we're talking about are character creation options that allow us to make a character that is the reason we're able to get into these suits and do the things we're able to do. And we want them to not be obvious. Like you said, it's not that just that you're strong or smart.
Right.
In my opinion, I think allowing the player to choose that entirely, right? So imagine this. Imagine that you have a list of things you can choose from that you get mechanically, no matter what. So in a sense, what we're doing is stuff like we did in Dead Man's Guide, where I'm going, well, all the sub races get at least this amount. Right. So what we're doing is we're going, okay, that means you can choose this amount of any of this stuff. It's a little bit like an equation. We're doing the math and we're putting it in a different place. I say that because if you then chose creativity, that's your lens that you're viewing the world through, you are more creative. You have that on your sheet, but the only thing that affects is when you're playing, you are more creative. That's your deal. Now, that doesn't have to be your only deal. We talked about lenses before.
Sure.
But in my opinion, it would work to be that broad if you allowed the person to choose that, and then they chose the mechanical thing that gave them, like of their pilot, or made their own, because again, we're kind of doing the math of it, if that makes sense. So now you have a pilot that has a special thing, but instead what you've done is you've explained to the person making the character what that special thing has to be like. And then they get to choose it because it doesn't have a mechanical effect. it could be whatever they want. And just like every other role-playing game, if they find that their creativity is just not coming up often enough, maybe they work with the GM to change it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And
but in a sense, yeah.
I was saying, I'm open to that. I think for me as a creator, all of those mechanical things I have green lights about. Like, I have no issue with the thing that makes you interact with your suit not literally give you your bonuses.
Exactly. Just like the decoupling. Yeah.
Right. I'm obviously okay with that. I mean, look at Dead Man's Guide. But that, in this case, is another way to kind of set it aside. Because then, but what I'm saying is, while it could be anything, I need something to put my hooks into, even if no one ever uses it, of like, what cool categorization.
I see.
Right?
You're
So
not looking for a way to solve the problem. You'd like to figure. I see. You want to brainstorm what it is, so that we know what it is.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
I've learned recently that the reason, to me, game design is secondary to story for me. So like, what's more important for me as a designer is coming up with a really neat concept and then making the mechanics match that. Does that make sense?
No,
I'm very like, come
sense.
up with the story and the cool creativity first and then figure out what game it is. And I didn't realize that until just recently.
Yeah.
So everything you said is actually kind of exciting, because then we won't have to have like 4 different pilot types: the creative, the shark face.
Exactly.
Like
yes, yeah.
But I'm looking for a cool lore, like anime style. Like, what is the elevator pitch? What is the sauce on this thing? Oh, it's mecha, but like, what's the reason that I could have an accountant in that mecha that's like really competent because of the way that the thing works? So and I understand what you're saying of like, yeah, just make it that it's like, it could be anything. But I'm like, I know, but for me, I have to know what it is.
No, and that's fair. So let me throw something else out there then. In my opinion, it's I feel a little bit XY problemed here, because I don't love that idea. I don't have anything to hook into for me in a sense, but okay. So let's talk about this. This is something I was going to bring up earlier. Let's put it this way. I think that we need to talk more about what types of things this could be. So in Alias, the TV show, Sydney Bristow is chosen because one of the reasons she's chosen at a young age, and I believe that's how it works, she does a special puzzle that at a young age, if you can do it, shows a type of spatial reasoning that most people don't have.
Sure.
It's not that she's particularly creative or smart. It's that she has the not propensity, but there's another word, the not priority. You have a lot of potential. She has the potential. They can do a test at some point that allows them to see the potential.
That's perfect.
So what if instead, okay, yeah, because like let's say
like that.
What
That's exactly what I'm looking for. A weird, like, it could be anybody, anything, but they see reality in a way that helps them put it back together.
Okay. And that's where I'm like, that's where I say, okay, maybe, but that can't be in the rules. But what I said, Ken, right? You're almost like, that is something a player could say, but that's not something we can say. Does that make sense?
It does. And so what I would say, so I'll say this is my current best approach to this lore. And we can continue this conversation and we can keep going. For now, what I would write in is I would say, you were selected because of the way you passed the such and such test.
We go back to MIB. There's a test all the players have to do.
That's it.
Right? Because that's the thing. To me, zooming out, you're like, okay, it's not that they choose something, it's that they find out what theirs is. Again, they can still choose it.
No, that's it.
But you just need to like do the thing in world to like make it matter. I don't know.
The glue for me was the test.
Okay, yeah, and that's
really all I needed. Was I'm like, yeah, but there's got to be. I couldn't figure out in the sliding scale of like what to land on.
Yes,
I was like, it's too.
And that's
too
why
granular,
every time you said
broad.
it, yeah, I was like, I like you said, I didn't have anything to grab onto at the same what you were saying. But I see now where it's like, I think that's what's important is there are people dedicated. Think like, well, they do this in Alias as well, but think just like the Avengers Initiative is the one I'm thinking. Nick Fury. There's a Nick Fury that goes around and says, hey, you recently did that, you recently finished that test that we secretly gave you. You passed with flying colors. We want to talk to you about the Carrion initiative. Like there would be recruiters because they would be secretly performing these tests on people because they would need people, but they can't advertise it. You know what I mean? It would have to be a secret. So it's like you get recruited for this. Yeah, but I'm just imagining like that test or whatever. So
right. And so
Jonathan brought up something you said before, which is so funny because I didn't love that idea, but it makes more sense now that we've talked about it a lot.
What?
There have been a few things in the chat, so it's fair to go through. Because a person said, what if a world builder like you guys enters the suit? That's what's interesting is that type of question is showing me that like the player would have to decide that because I don't know because I'm not playing that player, if that makes sense. That's silly. Gabe said something funny. It made me laugh earlier. Do y'all know what gave time the flu? And I just thought that was hilarious.
No, I bet they're like, I don't know. Gabe, that's a really funny way to say it. Please let us know if that's a real question and I don't want to laugh in your face. But that's funny.
Oh, right? Because, okay.
Hey, y'all know what gave time the flu?
I think that they were being, you're right.
So Jonathan,
but
I appreciate you saying that. James, you never told me you didn't like that idea.
Because it didn't matter at the time. There wasn't enough around it. It might have made sense later. It just didn't. It's okay. It's not that I didn't like it. It's that at the time I didn't feel that it made sense, but it makes sense now.
Well, and that's the thing. I had, and you're right. I was also, it was so early in the brainstorming that I was throwing out like
we were all over.
There was nothing that you could put together to make a meal.
Well, exactly. And so I was still in the question asking phase because I'm like, we don't have anything here yet that I can,
So Jonathan, the way that I imagine this happening is, and I'm not sure if this is by the government or the organizations or not, but excuse me, when the sickness, because it's literally quantum reality is sick.
He was trying to be funny.
Okay. Quantum reality is sick. It's bubbling up. I don't think that you can see it unless you have one of the suits. That's what I think. It's like when you put
or like special measurement equipment, like you don't see it at all.
You can't see it. Normals can't see it.
Normal people, regular people walking around.
There might be other ways. Exo goggles, satellite images.
It makes it easier to keep hidden.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is that it's sick at a quantum level. So it's like, I don't know. This is going to kind of get weird, but I feel like when it... Okay, here's my explanation. Yes, Jonathan, I thought the exact same thing. But how about this? When it first starts, it's at a quantum level. It's at a subatomic level. So people can come up and neutralize that threat. The Carrion can come up and try to like fix it. And that's less of like a fight and more of like whatever. Puzzle.
There's like a lower level team maybe that like goes and like handles the smaller events that are because like, it's like extinguishing a fire.
Right. They haven't exploded into a full-blown infection or a wound. It's like, hey,
stuff didn't start crawling out.
You have a rash.
That's how it works.
We're going to put cream on it. You know, like on your arm, you got some poison ivy or whatever. And so the idea is that I think once it does start getting bigger and worse, I think normals can see the reality like shifting and being weird, but they can't see the actual bacteria because it's at a quantum level. But the pilots, it looks like they're in the upside down. They can see it all. Because I thought it would be terrifying if you're just a person and like the world just seems really weird around you and you see this mecha like run by in the street shooting a gun at nothing.
Yeah, right. It's like and then you tell somebody about that and they're like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, like what?
I guess that's a tough one because there's cell phone video, but we can talk about that.
I gotta figure. I gotta figure out whether or not it's important to me that this is secret.
Right, and that's where we talked about it. Where I'm like, everything you say, if it's secret, then has to be tempered with. But how do people not find out? And the thing is, they do it like in Men in Black. The way they say that is they go, people aren't looking closely enough. That's how they hand wave it, but not in a bad way. Where it's like sometimes it's okay. Look at
Men in Black as like some.
I think so,
but I hadn't thought about that, but I love the idea.
And we found it here. Yeah, like I didn't think about it either.
Well, I love the idea that the test is more about the way that you think. It's not necessarily a test of a way of thinking.
Right, exactly. In my opinion, it is like, okay, it's like the Kobayashi Maru. in that the point is that you're not supposed to know that the test is something other than what it looks like.
Right.
Another one is in Community, they do a test. They do a psychological test where they keep telling a group of people that are waiting that it'll just be 10 more minutes and see how long it takes for people to crack, where it's like the test, they're saying, hey, the test is going to begin soon, but the real test already started. I'm imagining that kind of vibe where they're like, oh yeah, they could be saying it's a test of this other thing, but really, they're watching for something else. Kind of like the Men in Black one, they were looking for something specific that wasn't necessarily who got the highest score.
Right.
Charles says, funny thing, I found out dyslexic people are able to think in 3D. Now, I've never heard that, but like when you say something like that, it suddenly makes me imagine their difficulty reading differently, because dyslexic people, I think, often find themselves transposing letters and sometimes having a difficult time reading because of it. But if it's because their brain works a different way, literally their brain, we say they struggle. They struggle because in our society, you have to be able to read non-3D text. But you can imagine how if suddenly somebody came up with a text that dyslexic people could read better than we could, because we don't see the way they do, right? Suddenly there's a new perspective of like, oh no, we read in 3D, it's way faster. And you're like, oh, I can't do that. It's as though I'm dyslexic now.
So Jonathan,
your writing,
Jonathan had a really good thought that I hadn't considered, and I will absolutely use, if that's okay. What if the suits are how you kill the monsters, but the pilots need to be able to see them? So it's not anyone could just jump in the suit. Your way of thinking is how you can see reality twisting.
Oh, I see. Because I was like, no, Jonathan just said something, but I see. He unlocked that for you where it specifically ties to anybody that gets in the suit can get in the suit, and there could be adverse effects. But at the very least, you won't be able to perceive the other reality. It's like right. you have to have this some sort of special evolution that they're looking for that allows you to use the suit to its fullest potential.
That makes it more terrifying because you could be unarmed, but still have to deal with the threat.
Oh, yeah.
You don't necessarily have this exosuit, but so check this out. The way that I would put it is the thinkers who pass the test can see it without the aid of anything. They can't see it perfectly, but they can see it where others can't see it at all.
Yeah, they have a better idea.
They have a better idea.
It's like having a talent for something.
Exactly.
It's like, we can train it and make it even better, but like you started off like you have the psychic ability in some stories,
Sure. And I don't know how to say this. I don't want to be insensitive to people who are colorblind, but it would be like everyone in reality is colorblind, but there are some rare few who aren't. And you can't change that. It's like, no, I don't. It's this color. And they're like, no, it's not.
And at risk of going off on a whole thing, because Charles said, yeah, we don't think in line. I'm assuming Charles is dyslexic. We don't think in line. It makes reading hard. I have another dyslexic friend who she records audio for something I do at work. And, well, she has to read it, So that's what's so interesting is, like you said, Tim, the perspective of imagine we call things disabilities that are things that if you have them don't work well because of the way society works, right? There are stairs everywhere because most people have legs. So the people that don't have the use of their legs are at a disadvantage, but we caused that, right? That's the thing I want to focus on. The linear concept of text is what causes people, that don't think in a straight line trouble reading in a straight line. So now I'm imagining that this same thing, potentially that is a disability and not directly necessarily, but something that in our society is perceived as a bad thing. Like you said, colorblindness is a good example, get a benefit. You know what I mean? Because it's all about perspective. It's like, hey, we're looking now for people that have evolved differently, but humans' understanding of evolution is different now because before we didn't craft the environment in which we came up. It was actually like survival of the fittest, where now it's survival of the fittest in our game. And anybody outside of our game is not fit. So, I like that idea.
Well, and I think, too, I want to make it so that there's an extra level of... So, like, this... I call it the Wolverine conundrum. Wolverine is the perfect marrying of a few really cool concepts that if you took one away, he wouldn't be nearly as cool. But you need all of those things for him to be able to do the stuff he does. So they don't necessarily make sense together.
Right.
So you need the adamantium skeleton so that he has something to regenerate, something that can't be destroyed. And you need the regenerating factor so that he can heal so quickly. And you need his sort of animalistic, and then the claws, because that's that like extra layer. So like those three things work perfectly together. I want to make it so that the pilots don't just like, oh, hey, but like there's an adamantium or something where like they take some of the Carrion and they're like, hey, to take this test, there's no going back. Like if you fail, it's fine, but we have to do X and Y. Like not literally put an adamantium skeleton, but it's like, hey, we have to inject you with a little bit of quantum infection.
So I like that.
Or something. You know what I mean?
I would say it's more like that's how you get in. You do the test and then they go, like they do the test first and they try to sell you hard on it, right? They're trying to effectively get you to enlist. They're saying, we found something in you that is in nobody else and we need it. But what we need to do is we need to stick you with this needle of stuff that's from another realm in a sense.
Right.
And you need to be okay with that.
But like the puzzle itself also is like them seeing if they can. Like, does it make sense? So it's like,
it does. I was separating them finding out they can from then buying fully into, okay, now that you, like, I want people to struggle with, do I get the serum, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right, separately, and I think then maybe it's a two-part test.
Exactly, yeah, that's fair.
The first part is to see, like, if you're compatible.
Are you a candidate? Then they take you to the place. You know what I mean? Like,
and then the second part is like, we're going to do another test, but really what they're doing is like, we're going to make you see this stuff, and then if you...
And some people die.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, you are compatible, but you know what I mean? You didn't accept the whatever, you know, like it killed you. And that's what happens sometimes. Maybe not as a part of the game, but as part of the story.
No, exactly. Blake Baker says, that sounds like the anime Bleach. Only certain people can see, but if you... Okay, so I've never seen Bleach, but now I'll check that out for inspiration as well.
You may have to deal with...
Basically, if you can see stuff, you can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
you
exactly.
Can see the Oni sitting in the corner or whatever they fight in Bleach. I think it's undead or spirits.
It's interesting because that is a very common trope as far as like a hero's journey. One of the big things is, right, they would go get the first test that allows them to see it and then go home and say, I want nothing to do with this. Now being able to see it everywhere, they would then be forced to sort of overcome that and go, okay, I'm ready, because not only can I not go back from this, right, but I am the type of person that upon seeing what is happening, I have to help.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it forces the hero to go.
Right. So Jonathan says maybe the test unlocks their ability to see. Oh, yeah. Oh, dude, same page where like those who solve the puzzle or whatever enables them to see the threat. So, yeah. So, okay. Okay, and then he says, ooh, very Dragon Age-like. In Dragon Age, to become a Grey Warden, you drink dragon blood. If you live, you join.
Oh, yes, right? Because that's such a... I forgot about that one, but that is... trying to think what else, but like that's such a common trope where there's always like multiple people in the test, right? Think Men in Black, but at the end of the test, then all three people drink the thing, and then only the main character lives. You know what I mean? Like the other two, or a little bit sideways, but Indiana Jones, when he has to do the
Holy Grail,
the tests, the Holy Grail, the three tests, and the first person, you know, they send two guys first to see what happens, and you're like, okay, well, we know what could happen.
So I feel like I have now a placeholder where there was just a blank spot, which is right now. I love the idea that it's like, and the way that if I had to write it today, I would write it is, you have to do the such and such a test. This is a test to see how you think, basically how your thought patterns work, and, you know, to identify if you're one who could see the Carrion.
Yeah.
If you do qualify, you decide what it is about your personality or your thought patterns or who you are that let you see. And then they test you and blah, blah. So basically what you're saying earlier, like you give the player full, like what makes you special? Why did you pass this test?
Yeah, like making a character assumes that one of those things exists. So you're telling us what yours is. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that is exactly what I needed. So then you get that framing device of like, okay, cool. And then there are some examples. And I think it could be cool to be like, one case study showed that a person blah, 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 blah. Another showed a da-da-da-da-da-da. But the opportunities and the basically humanity is beautiful and the differences in all of us are without making it sound ham-fisted. Basically,
but
the fact that everybody is different is a benefit in this case. What makes you different so that you could see the Carrion?
Exactly. Absolutely. Like, what is it about? Because the other thing I didn't think about is whatever profession they came from or life they came from in general would also have an effect on the type of character they were.
Sure.
Which seems to be about character creation too, because it's like, well, yeah, go ahead.
And I was exactly that, because James, I don't think that this is something that a lot of people would think is like, well, this is a fun idea for an anime, maybe, but I love the idea that a party could be made up of, like, yeah, I'm an accountant. Like,
right,
so
exactly, like, yeah.
That also gives me an idea for one of the suits. So one of the mecha is an automated attack mecha. So the person inside of it can override it, but they're really just there for their brain.
Oh yeah. And okay, so
does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does. And this is where I'm like, this conversation, or what I'm about to say, is the thesis of game first, plot second versus plot first, game second.
Yeah.
In that's cool, except that I would never want to play that mech.
No, you could, because, well, you just got... Why?
Or you could make it...
I'll tell you why you want to play that
more support-based, right? They would have abilities that are not... You know what I mean? Because what you said is they wouldn't have to act. Something could act for them. And I'm like, well, making that in a game is dicey. And I know you said you could override it, but what if instead we simply gave them another role? They're not good at fighting, but they're good at thinking tactically, so they're the commander, But let me know what you were going to say. I just wanted to make sure, like...
So what I
was... It can still be non-combat.
I see what you're saying. Who would want to play a character that you're not playing? But what I would... Because maybe that wouldn't work. But what I was thinking is you would role play and you would be the robot and the person. So you'd be
I see. You would still play combat.
You would be and then the directive. But the other thing is that it wouldn't be, I guess, semi-automated is better. We're like...
No, and what you're delving into is the idea that it's an exosuit. It is to some degree powered and doing something for you. It's strong for you. It shoots for you. Like, everybody gets a little bit of that. There's a little auto aim, like it's a symbiosis.
Think
probably.
About the Iron Spider suit.
Exactly. Like I wasn't thinking of it that way, where, what you're describing is like the suit and you are working in concert at all times. Like you said, semi-automated, where to some degree it's pointing at somebody before you're needing to pull the trigger because it knows they're there.
And it's because,
and you get to,
it's because you don't want to waste someone who can think so uniquely because they don't have combat training.
Exactly. And that's where, in the same respect, it's simply a matter of preference and game design.
And figuring out how to actually do that.
Well, exactly. What I'm saying is I like the idea of having somebody with different powers rather than changing per character what the power looked like as much.
Yeah, I get you.
And it's getting into finicky parts of these details that we won't have to decide for a long time.
Exactly. And I would say if this turned into a board game, then that's very easy. So that I'm open to that too, where it's like, rather than making the accountant do what the soldier does, give the accountant something that the accountant can do.
And to put it another way, give people a chance to play a non-combat character that still doesn't do combat.
Right.
In a sense, you know what I mean? Like, so that's all. Yeah. Well, exactly. But like that, where there is simply a benefit to going, well, if we're going to make a support-like character anyway, we should lean into this concept because now you can do either.
Yeah.
You can be a conscientious objector and not shoot the gun, but help. Yeah. Or be like, I need it to shoot the gun for me.
Well, and the way that I was thinking of doing that is that, and this could be abstracting it too much to where it doesn't feel like there's a difference. But
Pig Pug just showed up.
Hey, what up, Pig Pug? 214. The thing I was thinking was if we're in Carrion exosuits and we're trying to fix reality, I do imagine there being like Lovecraftian weirdness and things like that. And one of the things I was talking about way before that I really didn't get a chance to talk through because I just thought of something else. We haven't seen like a new creature type in a long time. And I thought if this wasn't done, we just have to understand that it would take a lot of art direction and testing and finding something that worked. But if reality itself would turn into creatures. So an amalgamation of an automobile, a tree, concrete, but it wouldn't look like a golem made out of that stuff. It wouldn't
look like a Katamari of those things.
It would not look like a Katamari, because if you really look at it, and I'm speaking like from armchair TV knowledge, but I'm of the mind that most of what we have in our world is made up of the same base elements, just arranged in different ways.
Yeah, and I mean, that is literally true, right?
So,
there's only so many elements, and it's those together, yeah.
So that plus the Carrion virus equals what? You know what I mean? So like, come up with a new... So the idea is that these creatures you're fighting they don't exist somewhere else.
Yeah,
it's not like from an extra dimensional thing, things are coming out like, wow, we live in the darkness.
And here's where that usually, like, how you do that and don't do that, in my opinion.
Sure.
In a sense, sometimes an alternate reality, because what you're describing as reality is sick, right? Something came from somewhere that gave us a cold.
Sure.
That somewhere has to be somewhere. I say that because oftentimes, let me put it this way. I've never considered how freely in a fantasy game we walk between different planes.
Sure.
What if there were different elements on the other side of that portal? You walk through and carbon doesn't exist in that universe. You're a carbon-based life form.
Yeah.
What happens to you?
Right.
Right? You know what I mean?
Sure.
So consider that aspect, but now that was physical. You go through something and it's physical. That's usually how portals work. But consider in this case, something comes through the portal of a different type and it becomes something.
I see what you're saying.
So like imagine like the upside down, but it is a portal, I'm saying, but like to go through it is to be turned into something else. And going from us that way, you die, right? A human would die, like whatever happens to them, but your matter is not your matter anymore. It's something else. But when they come through, they become creatures,
So, and that is the thing, is that I think that actually could work. One of the things that I was trying to do, and again, it's like when you do one different thing in a recipe, but it's like, no, but that's one of the things that I'm trying to do to put my stamp on this recipe. That's why it's that extra step most people skip. I love Lovecraftian horror. And we have a lot of really cool like stuff from other planes coming through. The reality is thin. There was something really terrifying to me about quantum particles mutating. And I don't want to be insensitive about this, but like, content warning about cancer. And I have had many people that I know who have unfortunately had it or passed away from it. But the way that I understand cancer to work is when cells are reproducing, one of them mutates.
And then, it makes a bad one.
Right.
A bad factory in a sense.
And then that keeps doing that.
Making more bad factories and infecting more.
I thought that it would be...
In a very broad sense.
In a very broad sense. But I thought, taking the idea behind the idea, there isn't somewhere else. There is no portal. Reality mutated. There's no bad guy. There's no... It's very like... Because, I mean, viruses in general, too, like, they're not bad. Well, no. They're not evil. They're not malevolent. They're just doing what they're... like built to do,
evolved to do. Exactly.
I liked that idea, that it was a cold, non-cosmic horror that's like, oh no, like reality is like mutating and getting sick. Now, I could be swayed. I'm always on the dark portal like game like all day, but this seemed like a very slightly unique variation of that kind of trope.
I don't disagree. And the only thing I can say is I think you're setting yourself up for a very difficult game to design. That's not bad. It just means that designing it will make a very unique game.
I just want to do hand... Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just want to do the hand waving in a different place.
No, and that's fair. And I guess what I'm saying, we will know if that will work based on other decisions. Right? Because in a sense, let's talk about this. You don't know what people are going to go do yet. And so far, if you do, that's fine, do, right?
And that's what I'm saying.
But let me say this, it has to be in our world is so far what it sounds like you've described. So based on me saying that impression that you've given me, What were you going to say?
No, I would hand wave it. It's still going to be very Lovecraftian. It's just that.
But in what sense? Like, you go somewhere and I have to describe to my players the place they're fighting, and how do I do that?
Yeah, so it would be like
the modern world taken over by something.
Yeah, it would just be like, and whatever we make that look like, whether it's like the Upside Down and it's all black and there's like ash and stuff.
It kind of like, or like Doom is another one I'm
Doom
thinking, where it's like you see
one.
all this stuff, like it spreads and
that's a great one where it's like
biological
Doom.
And stuff. Because again, then that stuff, do people see that stuff? You know, I'm imagining like when there's like in an apartment block where there's an outbreak, they like tent it for fumigation. You know what I mean? Like they hide the whole thing, because if somebody looked, they'd see this other stuff. They might not see the creatures. But they would see this. They'd see something.
I think that. The other thing I think that's really important to mention is there would still be like a bunch of creatures and stuff. They just would be the virus. Like
no, totally. Like you would still fight like, creatures.
And
I guess what I'm saying is like they're making another place makes a place for players to go and explore. And I understand why you don't want to make that place, but basically we're saying, well, then we have to make the place they can explore very interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's not, but we just have to there has to be something new for them to find in that apartment block in Manhattan.
So let's take all of the cool stuff you get from going to another place and then just overlay it on top of the apartment block in Manhattan, and we'll call it a wound, and be like, for right now, let's put a pin in whether or not it's secret, because more and more I feel like that's becoming an impediment to everything else.
And I agree. That was why I originally brought it up. So we'll pretend that's not decided yet.
Or
we just
secret,
won't bring that.
Doesn't matter, right?
Exactly.
I think that it would just be like a rainstorm in terms of like it developed here and it's raining in these areas. Like that's just where the rain's falling right now.
And I get
right. And it would just be like a wound opens up, and then when the players go there, they either have to walk through like a shimmering membrane, or they have to, and then it looks like maybe mostly the cell block, but there's also a floating train car, and there's also crazy stuff. It's like there would be generators to talk about how warped and crazy reality is.
What if when they walked through it, it was a different time or place? Because everything you've said about the rewriting, but that you said, go ahead.
I just don't want there to be time travel.
That's fair. But in a sense, it's not. It's more like instanced. Think Upside Down, but not Upside Down, like we said. And also, it probably wouldn't, in that same way, it wouldn't be full of people, right? If you walk in an apartment block in Manhattan and now you're in the jungles of Vietnam in this place.
Sure.
It is like a dream of the jungles of Vietnam. It's not. You're not there. To walk out of it is to walk back out. It's like, it's what you said, it's a manifestation. If you think of reality as code, like numbers, pixels, shifting one pixel has turned this into another. It's almost like we moved the longitude and latitude.
Yeah,
right? What we need from the other ways, we need it to. It can still be an apartment block in Manhattan if that's where we are, right? Because we can go around the world. But in a sense, to me, I think the game will be cooler, and even a story would be cooler if when you went there, you were surprised by it. Because then inside that, you can find something else. Now that we're outside of our own reality,
Sure.
you can then have all this stuff on the other side of the portal. But now the portal is a portal to something that looks like a place on Earth.
I love it. And I think that the only constraint that I would put on it, and I know you were just saying like another time and place, it has to literally be a place as it is somewhere else on the Earth then.
Okay, and that's fair.
It doesn't.
But what I'm saying is it's like a projection of it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, what I think, and I love that idea. What I think it is multiple things trying to exist in the same space-time.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Like as far as the reason, like why is this happening, kind of thing, like
because
things phasing in and out.
Yeah. It took and that's how some sicknesses work. They replicate where they shouldn't, and they reproduce things that they shouldn't where they shouldn't. So like you get this tissue on this organ because this cell was sick.
And and I don't know if this is what you're saying, but what you made me realize is, so apartment block in Manhattan plus jungle of Vietnam.
Correct.
Because now you can play with both.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where you're like, but like not necessarily one that makes sense. There's not a tree on the regular story building. It's like, for some reason, there are elements of both here.
Yeah,
how does
MC
that
Escher.
Where it's like, yes, yeah, where it's like, it's not, you're not still in a building and there's just trees, a lot of trees.
No.
It's like, no, you're going through the trees, and now in the distance, there's just an apartment block that has no vegetation on it. And it's just like regular. And I feel like it's, now anything can happen.
Like a dream, I think that it's also less, and that's why you need a certain kind of mind. You can drift. Like,
okay, yeah,
it's not just walking in the apartment block. It's your spatial sense of decoding reality has to be strong enough that you're able to reconcile a physical plane within this strangeness.
Yeah, like it's the mental aspect of the horror, the Lovecraftian horror, cosmic horror style thing, as far as like, this could break your brain in a different reason, but it's the same. Like, you're like no, looking at this too closely is bad.
Right. It would break you. You don't go insane, but you're just floating in a dream. You're not latched on to anything in our, and what if, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say to try to make it more relatable for me and for anybody listening. It's as though you went somewhere else and suddenly you couldn't reconcile 2 + 2. Right. That would bug you, but in more ways where you're like, there's a lot of like things, fundamental truths are not true. And in whatever that means, so it's maybe that adds another thing where it's like, not everything can be trusted. Explosives don't always explode, maybe, you know what I mean? Things like that, where it's like, it's hard to tell what could happen because reality is broken.
And so that could be another thing that you have in the game, which is as a player control a person who, it's like a reality grounding field. So if there's 3 people, those things combine, and if one is killed or incapacitated, things get weirder for everybody. So if you, you need more people to build a stronger field almost around you, and separating or losing power to your suit or something is like, one person in one suit probably can't survive that long. Exactly.
It's
But I love that. I love that it's like, because then you could have roll tables of all different kind of spaces and spatial things, and like, you're in a factory in Queens, but you're also, like you say, you're in an ocean.
It does open a very interesting style of gameplay, because literally anything can happen.
That's kind of what I was going for, was like very science weirdness, less Lovecraftian, but more like science weirdness. I want to go to the chat because I think it is blurry.
I was going to say, I think we should definitely, I think that's great. Yeah. Because there was a lot of stuff. I did want to get through that, and I think you felt the same, but yeah.
I did. I'm feeling extremely confident in all the stuff that we've kind of landed on. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, it's, and because I was having trouble like grabbing onto it, but really talking about it this quickly, this type of iteration is very important, I think, to be able to, and with 2 people, honestly. I've done it with 3 before, and sometimes like this type of thing where you're just like, I don't know. There's something about the give and take of 2 people that I think is very good.
Yeah.
But okay, so somebody, Pigpug mentioned they were here late. We saw that. Charles mentioned that this was like Overwatch. I think they said Overwatch member, and I believe that's what they were talking about. Is like, it would be like being a part of Overwatch. Maybe that was a long time ago. I never heard Pigpug's origin story, but they posted it in the chat. That's how Pigpug came to be, a pig and a pug combined. So I think it's possible. One of the jokes a streamer I used to watch would always say is, if anybody had a number at their name, they would say, and I'll just say it, Pigpug 214, because Pigpug 1 through 213 were taken. It puts a funny image in mind of 1, no, 2, no, 3, no. Gabe mentioned that, so Time has an STD, and that was another one. Like, yes, Time went somewhere it shouldn't have.
Oh, can I answer real quick, and I'll make it very quick?
Yeah.
You don't
have to lie to me, but go ahead.
I don't want to say canonically in the game why or how Time got sick. Nobody knows.
Oh, and I like that, because
like, where did the flu come from? Maybe someone knows, but probably not.
Well, it was mutated, right? It's kind of the same thing where you're like, well, it came from somewhere. But we can't track when it happened because of that. So that's where people can say, oh, well, it's like a virus. Like, well, where did it come from? Well, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
That's what science is trying to answer. I imagine parts of missions would be, trying to bring back stuff that gives you clues. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
Pigpug says, in that case, maybe quantum entangled particles are light and dark, normal and mutated. This is when you were talking about the concept of how time is mutated, I think. And that's what's interesting. We throw around things like quantum and stuff, and we haven't really been adhering to the true nature of those things. And that's not bad. I just want to point that out, that like we are kind of using sciencey terms, not necessarily sciencey, just for anybody watching.
Yeah. I think,
which is okay.
I latched on to quantum because it felt more sciencey and it was very replaceable. It was interchangeable with like interdimensional or extraplanar.
And I love that. Exactly.
But I'm like, different tonal picture, but very good point.
And person said there could be a whole department that is dedicated to keeping it a secret to society. And yes, that's what we talked about a little earlier, and we're still deciding if that's going to be a thing. But if it is, there would be somebody whose job it is to make sure nobody ever knows about this. Or similar to what some people believe people do with aliens, which is, or they would do their best. There would be initiatives to undermine anybody, even if it was not undermining the information, right? If they had a YouTube video or a phone video of this happening, they would ruin that person's life to make them a non-credible source, so that they would,
right.
There would be people like, because that happens in real life.
Sure. Yeah. And I think with what happens to the things in that space, I think that could be a game element. So if there were people there, which there probably likely would be in a lot of cases, you can try to save them and anchor them back in reality, basically.
Oh, yeah, right. There are people to save there. That makes sense.
Stuff like that, where it's like, but you're not like trying to like save a floating human. You're trying to save enough of like their quantum essence so that when you get them outside of it, like I'm even okay with getting as weird with like you collect people in containers.
You're sucking them up in a vacuum cleaner like Luigi.
Like Ghostbusters. Like Luigi. It's Luigi's Mansion 4.
But that's what I mean. I'm like, I'm with you because look, we saw a game where that's how you attack ghosts. So I'm like, no, because that's the perfect gamification, is you save people by finding their essence, and I don't know, you can do a lot with that.
Yeah, and I feel like the things that you could do with that in terms of like moral quantities is interesting, because
there's a lot of perspectives and stories.
Yeah, and you can make it to where it's like, yeah, you have 3 slots, but there's 7 people. So you can not take a weapon and take more slots to carry people.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean?
And yeah. Yes, and like,
that.
There are missions in XCOM and in the XCOM and XCOM 2, the newer ones, where you have to go save people, and it's very, very gamified, not in a bad way at all. But there are like 16 people to save, but sometimes instead of shooting at you, the aliens will shoot at people. Sure. Right? That's fair. But the point is, it's like you said, in effect, you're guaranteeing that you have to make choices because you know from the outset that you cannot save all of the people.
Yep.
So it's like you're building it in.
What you look
so
at
Pigpug said,
"Oh yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I was way back up. But yeah, Josh is here. Sorry, that was I skipped that one. I forgot. What's up, Josh? That one was way back. Pigpug said, so maybe it's not time travel. It's more like sliders. Sort of like that, but like Tim said, it's always like there is just not time travel in this world. I think that does trim off a lot of other weirdness that you can put into this kind of thing, where it's like, and then I trap. Yeah. We don't have to go there.
If I had to explain it, like probably a little more simply, reality to us, that is the world we live in. So it's all of reality on this earth. But just say like a certain square radius is sick, and the way that exhibits is with like a big pustule. Like, oh no, I'm sick. Except for the earth, it's like this weird mishmash of other parts of reality. So
yeah, and I think they were specifically calling out to like, it's more like sliders in that they went to somebody's body in a time, but time travel doesn't exist in that universe. Like,
I see.
Nobody can go back and change what happened.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess is what I'm saying. It's like, that's not a story we're telling. Yeah, I think that's what they were saying. And yeah, Gabe does stuff. Said he is trying very hard to stay from time travel. This was at the time we were talking about it. Josh wasn't here for it earlier, but he says, where are the non-secret societies groups trying to tell everyone the hidden truth? Like we covered that a little bit. There would be those, but they would be people would pay to quiet them, and to undermine them. And that doesn't mean they wouldn't exist. They would exist, but it wouldn't be a mainstream idea that this was happening, I think. It would be like, no, that can't. Kind of like the Matrix. That's maybe a good way to put it. It's like, if you don't know, it's just your life,
That's a good way to put it.
Pigpug says, so in your bizarre world, maybe the Earth spins faster or slower, thus you show up geographically somewhere else. Oh, I see what you mean there. I think now that we've landed on it can be anything, I do like that idea. But now that we can like mix and match, we don't even have to be constrained by that. But that would be a good one where it's like, oh, instead of it being Vietnam and an apartment block, it is this and this. And you later find out it's because of where the Earth is at the time. You know what I mean? Some other circumstance in reality. Like, that's perfect.
I do love that, like, where it's like, oh, it is just block 5 of, this apartment or this, dwelling.
Yeah, this building or this whatever, yeah.
But like you say, yeah, time is going really fast here. So it's like, that changes everything to where you're like,
exactly.
Maybe you're moving a lot quicker. So you're having to like, center yourself. Because I imagine that you wouldn't like flash. You wouldn't be like, zzz, but I think you would have to use your, like, whatever resource it is to anchor yourself in reality of like, no, I'm not moving faster. I'm moving at a normal rate. And so is everything around me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's like you have to be in sync with it. Yeah. And I see what you mean, because the symptoms of time being faster are difficult literally to imagine. But in a sense, you age more quickly. Everything happens more quickly. But that also means that everything biologically is happening more quickly. You get hungry faster. You get tired faster. And like you said, trying to align with that would be difficult.
Yeah. And just having that as like a condition of the space is neat.
Yeah.
Just like,
and it allows you to have different things on every mission because it's different each time, and you can have some show up again. So, okay, person, there should be people who learn how the sickness works and use that so they can basically change the code of reality. I do imagine that, like, as part of the story, somebody would wield it. As you said, Tim, I think there are a lot of questions about it, but somebody would get some and be like, how can I use this? How can I use this to rob a bank? Like,
Sure. And I totally agree.
Whatever.
And change the code of reality for worse and for better. If you could rewrite someone's spinal injury, like if you could rewrite someone's missing limb or something like that, you know what I mean? Then you could, if you could control it. So yeah, I love that idea, person.
You know what? And very interestingly, to turn that up, not really, but like to give you what I'm thinking, imagine that's how spellcasting works. Take that with a grain of salt, not even necessarily in this game, but consider that we have like sort of come up with another way to describe arcane energy. There's another energy out there and somebody's wielding it. But this same energy destroys the fabric of reality if not used correctly, So I think there's a lot of stories there of like, yes, you come upon something and it's not one of the normal outbreaks. As we talked about, it was an arson. Somebody caused this, and maybe for better or for worse, or maybe you find somebody missing an arm because they tried to use a thing and they tell you with their dying breath, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know what it would do. Here's my research, whatever, I can think of so many stories that are like rooted in that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think that's fantastic.
Charles asked if there'd be a madness stat or tracker. I think so. It's going to be a mechanical game. You mentioned earlier, Carrion would be like a stat or like a thing you have to manage.
Yeah, I don't have... Yes, the answer is yes. I would purposefully take it away from...
Overwatch.
Madness, the word madness or insanity, because I don't think it would be that. It would be like someone drifting off to sleep. Like, I think that I would probably have something called like an anchor. And it's like, oh my gosh, my anchor's down to 3. And if it gets to 0, I am no longer anchored. And I'm not able to, it's almost like being unconscious in a 5e game.
Yeah. And that's what's kind of like, that's in a sense what they're saying. But they said madness. What you're clarifying, if I'm correct, is you're saying it would be tracked mechanically and it would be like health. It would be something you have to do. You know what I mean? Like it would be, if my health in this case gets to 0, anchor, as one thing. But yes, it would, in a sense, be like those things where the lower your anchor gets, the worse it is for you.
Yes,
right?
And specifically, I don't think that I would have the people immediately go actually crazy.
Exactly. You're saying the implementation of it would be not like madness in a Call of Cthulhu.
Right, where you're like, you're cutting off your own fingertips and stuff. It's more like, whoa, I'm like super... Like maybe
I'm having trouble.
Yeah. Maybe it's almost like
they wouldn't be effective in combat anymore. They couldn't use the suit probably.
Maybe it's like a level of like sleep or like inebriation, where you kind of just feel like drunk.
Yeah, like you're dazed. That's what a lot of games call it.
And then like eventually you
get a
fall
status
asleep.
effect.
Right, you fall asleep, quote unquote, but that just means that you are now in a dream state where reality to you is just like, what is happening? You know, maybe you can't control it.
Yeah.
Like a dream where your psyche is kind of taken over. And you can react to what manifests, but you don't control what manifests, stuff like that. So,
and then there's, I was going to say just a few more things, but even more. Charles earlier was talking about Oracle from Batman, like Overwatch. Overwatch, they mentioned that. Makes a lot more sense.
Oh, yeah.
And then because we didn't get to it at the time out of context, I couldn't tell, but that makes a lot more sense now. Josh said, hey, that's my numbers in name rant. The first time I ever heard it was MF Pallytime says it. That's what he says about people's names. So I have probably heard you say that, but I did not know that was also your rant about names. But we'd say it a lot during Overwatch, but I learned it, when we play HOTS and I would hear him do it. Pigpug is my dog. Her birthday is Valentine's Day. Oh, that's very interesting. I see. I didn't know your dog had a YouTube channel. Me being silly. So a collective consciousness is some sort of grounder. That was earlier when we were talking about how there's like, the more you have, in a sense, there'd be like some field you share between each other of I don't know, brain waves, just making stuff up, that like grounds you in your reality versus what you're in. And Charles, what if the wound was affected by consciousness? Then you could have different times and worlds, but still technically here. I don't know exactly what you mean by consciousness, but in a sense, because we were saying everything could mutate, it now can be anything. I think that's important to the game. Is it being that?
I also love the fact that I think that players should have to have whatever you would call it. Like in D&D, it's like, oh, that's my flaw or my trait. There could be things from your own psyche that could manifest.
Oh, yeah, right? Like things that you see when you're troubling it because that's what is in you. Yeah, I really like that because then people can decide their own.
Yeah,
and like they can have them come up and how they manifest. Yeah, that's
cool.
It's
a I would imagine it would be like a high level idea. So it's like it's not one specific thing, like I'm afraid of clowns, but it's like that's not what I'm necessarily saying, but it's like maybe there's something that it's like a deeper character thing.
Yeah, like you're now seeing, just as one example, you're seeing the ghost of your younger sister that was very important to you, but you lost at a young age.
Sure.
But now you find yourself going into rooms where it seems like they're going because you're now having trouble remembering and keeping straight. Well, they're not right there. I can't, it's like you're going crazy in a mild way where like a dream, you're like, this doesn't make sense, but it makes perfect sense right now.
Yeah. And so what if it's like when you start getting low anchor, memories can manifest, fears manifest.
Like the reality of where you are is changing. Somebody mentioned maybe you start powering the wound. I do like the idea that being in there longer makes it worse, depending on what happens, whether that's because you don't belong there or your suit's not working. Like you said, if you don't power it. Gabe did ask if would there be a bad guy or just a virus. We talked about that a little earlier. There wouldn't be a bad guy doing the virus, right? You wouldn't eventually, like at the end of the RPG book, go, and the bad guy is doing the virus because of this, and this is how the virus works. It'll be like an in-world mystery that everybody's kind of contending with. Gameplay sounds like a cross between Shadowrun and Call of Cthulhu for me. Absolutely. Like it is investigation and
that's a great anchor.
Really good mix. Absolutely. Josh, okay, would an insane person suddenly be able to understand the weirdness if they were there? I do like the idea of like telling some sort of story, maybe an NPC of somebody that goes there that has trouble in our world but does better there. You know what I mean? I like that idea that's like, it's a matter of perspective. In this time, that person is better than we are. But in our time, we touched on that earlier, Josh, I don't think you were here, but that idea of like disability and the perspective on it and how this world could change that perspective, depending on where you ended up. Pigpug mentioned the mechanic for spellcasting makes sense, especially at the reverse gravity. And just that idea of a way to explain magical stuff. I don't even know if there's going to be spells in this game, but that was a way I've never considered. That was like a sciencey way to describe magic, and I thought that was cool. And then Gabe Does Stuff said, take off your anchor for the new high. I think that they were imagining that we were saying anchor like mechanically, like conceptually, but I think they meant like literally like the suit, like maybe you hear a voice in the suit at some point telling you should get out of it. It sounds like maybe that's what they're saying. Like hey, don't worry, you don't need all that protective equipment. Come and, embrace this new reality. And Josh says, okay, so do not take a Kuo-toa into one of these wounds. I think in general, yeah, like stuff getting into the wound would be bad. Just like anything else, right? Infection. It would be more fuel in a sense, maybe, or I don't know. I can see, but like they have reasons they want it to not spread and don't want it to, and want to keep a lid on it.
Right.
And Charles said, I have the midichlorian rule. Not everything should be answered. I completely agree. There's a great benefit to leaving empty spaces, especially big ones, because it's okay to say that the goal of everybody is to figure out what it is and not say what it is, because then the players can more realistically play their characters. Because if they in the back of their minds know what it is at a meta standpoint, you can still play the game and it's still okay, but it changes the game that's played. Because if a character literally doesn't know what it is and the player also doesn't, it will manifest differently than if just the character doesn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes some players might get clever and like, I don't know. We don't even have to go there, but I think that it does a lot. And you're right. There's a reason people hate midichlorians. And actually, you know what? I didn't think about it earlier. We talked about it what did you say? I said the TARDIS thing, and yours was was it a Marvel thing? The rewrite. Nick Fury's eye in the Marvel universe. So yes, we touched on that a little bit earlier, where it's like, yeah, you have to be careful with things like that because sometimes answering a question is bad. There's a whole conversation there, but yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we can wrap up here soon.
Yeah, same. I think too, like the way that we would explain magic, I would want to use some sort of probably made up mathematical term for it.
Oh yeah.
Like it's not magic. You're basically saying like, oh yeah, it's the such and such a theory. Or it's like another type of physics. It's like another school of study that is accepted, and it's not magic. It may do the same things, but it's using reality in a different way. It's the new combustion engine. It's right, and maybe even it's something called the Carrion equation, where it's like, or
right, and only known to people that are aware of this. So it's not broad. It's like only some people. It's very, very narrow who knows about this or can practice it or something.
Right. And just figuring out, like, I think that would be cool if it was like Carrion, whatever we name it. But it's less, I think this is how I'm imagining it. It's less conjuring a thing and more like it would be more like solving a puzzle. It's like solving an equation. You made a comment
it's like
before.
Math makes a thing.
Yeah. Well, what you're able to do is you're able to look at the situation, and you made a comment earlier, and we'll wrap up, but I just want to mention this.
Yeah.
You said that it would be tough.
Hellmage.
What's that?
Hellmage was here. They said, morning guys, I'll have to catch it later, but how's it going? It's going great. We're just wrapping up, but very cool stream. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've had a blast, man. Thank you. But I was just going to say so this is what this theory would be. You earlier said that 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4.
Oh, yeah.
Magic in this world is being able to see what does equal 4.
Right. It's math in another universe.
Yeah.
Kind of, right? It's like, okay, 2 + 2 equals something else. And this is why, because I know this other math.
Right.
This other arithmetic, I guess.
And this is how I think we can bring in all the other different like weirdness. Some people do that by using music theory. Some people do it with architecture. Some people do it by, in this universe, writing words or saying words out loud that make 2 + 2 = 4.
In a sense, and not the last one, but the other ones fit this. I don't know how this hits you.
Sure, and I'm just throwing weird stuff out there.
Yeah, totally. But the idea that it's like, that's their perspective. The name, it doesn't have to be the name, but imagine the name of this thing you're describing as your perspective is what allows you to see it. And they have different tests to test whether you have this unique perspective, and can do this thing and can understand these. But there are only markers of it, is what we talked about earlier. In a sense, like they look for something specific. Hey, you got this kind of, result on this test, or this preliminary test shows that you probably have what it takes to make sense of this other laws of physics,
Yeah. Well, and that's...
So, yeah.
So in that case, I would see about maybe... If everyone has the perspective, there would probably be people who were hyper perspective, who would be mages. Like they're magic users, where everyone can kind of see it. There are some people who can use it as a weapon and use it as a...
So to put it another way, basically, like all the people that are going in there have to have the perspective or whatever, but the people that have the natural talent for it and can use it more and for some reason have a propensity, they have force sensitivity, right?
Yes.
They can use it. Everybody else has access to it, but they're like, no, I do the same stuff and it doesn't happen. I can't wield it the way they do.
That's a great way to put it. It's like the force.
And I haven't seen it, but Charles said, have you guys seen how Mage the Ascension deals with magic? I have not. I've heard of the game, but
I've heard some cool stuff
I'm not
Barker,
familiar with how the magic. Exactly. Like, I don't know. Josh says, okay, as someone who has been very vanilla with RPGs, do worlds like this stop becoming a setting for stories and instead become the story itself? So in my opinion, Josh, that is a much deeper conversation. First of all, we're wrapping up. I'm sorry. Well, I'd love to talk about this later, but in a sense, you say vanilla with RPGs, and I have a lot of questions about that. But knowing some of the things I know about you, it does make the RPG the story in the way you're saying it. But the way I see it, rather, is that it's just like we are pulling monsters out of a bag for you to fight, and we're aware that those monsters are from a bag, right? Even though there's goblins in front of me, in front of the chalice in the game, and I'm beating them, I'm aware on some level that this is a fake game, right? I'm doing it for the sake of it. What we're doing is making it easier for players, if they want to use narrative tools that we see in TV shows, movies, books, and other types of media. So in a sense, when you say, do worlds like this stop becoming a setting for stories and instead become the story itself? What I say to that is, if you want them to, because you could play games just like you wanted to play, like Mecha Hack, and I say you want to play, but like what I understand to be more your style, you could play a Mecha Hack style game in this world and never deal with the narrative aspect of it. But we would include things that allowed you to more easily have character arcs and narrative arcs. That requires some suspension of disbelief as far as you have to make a thing happen or the story doesn't make sense, right? Like at some level, you start to change the details of the story to make the story cooler. You're no longer playing your character in that moment. You're playing the player. That, I think, is the part you don't often do. You don't like fiddling with reality of the game. And I shouldn't say you. My understanding really, again, bears a bigger conversation, but the style of gameplay you have seems to be more about the rules of the game and less about the narrative of the game. But in my opinion, when we put rules to how to do the narrative, I think you might like it because it will be rule-based. If that makes any sense. I know it does,
and I have an answer to that too. That is, so in addition to what James said, which is also how I feel overall. Yes, the answer is yes, because I'm basing this, and I don't know if you knew this, I'm basing this off of the mechanics of the Mecha Hack. So absolutely, this is like the story itself, because I'm like hyper concocting a specific genre. But if you don't want to use that specific genre, you could jump to Mecha Hack. So this is 1 degree deeper than usual, kind of, if that makes sense. So this, I'm getting like extra specific with a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
too.
right.
Because it's like you could always back it down to Mecha Hack if you wanted to play vanilla Mecha.
Exactly. Like for you and I to make it up, we need to talk about the deep, deep, deep down specific details that create it. And that allows us to do the bigger details. And then we get a setting that you can play in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like we're talking about it in a way that we talk about every setting, but we usually do that backing off of it so that you have a setting, but you know what types of stories you could tell in that setting. And it comes off like a normal role-playing game you're used to, you know?
Yeah. And but yeah, I think it's a great question. And yeah, I think they do. And I think it's like one level in from just regular high level world building. I'm just looking for that like really unique recipe. But
yeah,
let me see if
there were a few more questions. We can run through them.
Yeah, I'll just run through it.
Stop, but yeah.
Would such a system have very open interpretive magic system or one more akin to regulated D&D? So I think this system wouldn't necessarily have magic or a magic system, but I would reskin some of the weapons and stuff to make it so that they felt more like you were doing magical type things.
Like everybody would do the same things, but some people do them with magic in a sense.
Quote unquote, yeah, this hyper, mathematics or whatever we'd call it. In the same way that like there are several different kinds of, ways to deal damage. one of them is called a smite, the other one is called a fireball, the other one is called, it's like,
right? They all do damage.
they all kind of do the thing. So I would, but overall, I don't know that there would actually be a spell casting system, and more just your weapon.
You'll have abilities or like something you can do or use in the game or whatever they're called. Yeah, exactly. Pigpug mentioned, I feel like time in these wounds should cause some cumulative PTSD for adventurers. We talked about that a little earlier. I was imagining like the way astronauts are. They come back and they have to like get bone density treatments and other things are different about the way their body works because they were not under gravity. It would be the same. Where the longer you're there, the worse it gets. And similar to like real soldiers or football players, it's like you see the late in life effects of it. They don't tend to live long, great lives if they've done this as a career, if that's a thing, One of the trade-offs of being a hero, in a sense. Charles, the perspective of magic use is a lot like Shadowrun handles magic. I'll have to check that out too, because I have a rough idea, and it's like shamanism and stuff. I'll have to look more into it. Blake says, I really dig this idea, and I hope you guys follow through on it. And Gabe said, when is the next stream? And I asked both of those together because I wanted to say a few things. I don't know. One, if you aren't subscribed to us here on YouTube, definitely subscribe. I think there's the little the bell to get a notification. That's the best thing. We don't have a streaming schedule as much, and that could be done better. But really, if you want to know when we're going to stream, one of the best ways to do that, I think, is you can follow us on Patreon. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/tabletopterrors. But we'll post live streams and other things we do there. We do also have tiers if you're into that kind of thing. If not, no pressure. We share free stuff there too. It's just a great place for like a community to hang out and for us to post stuff. And so if you want to know, you can follow us there as well. And we'll post about more streams we're doing and everything. But overall, we don't have a definite. But to speak more to what you said, Blake, you will get pieces of this potentially on Patreon. This is a project Tim's working on for our publishing company, Absolute Tabletop, basically. But we're just brainstorming it now as Tabletop Terrors, and we will release parts of it as well as parts of stuff I'm working on. And Jeff, if you've seen him on the channel, stuff he's working on as part of our Patreon. So $3 a month, you get access to everything released every month. As far as like actual content, $5, and you can see videos like this when we don't stream them. So I just wanted to throw that out there. If you're curious when we're doing it or you want to see how this progresses, that's how you follow us. You can also check us out in the Absolute Tabletop official group. And, there are various ways to follow us. But basically, that's your best bet on more Carrion news and, just generally when we're going live.
Yeah, this has been really fun.
Paul's here, but we're leaving. Hi, what's up, Paul?
Hey, Paul. I'm on a streak. This is the second stream I've done where I've actually finished everything that I had questions about and had.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I had one with Keelan Lloyd about Iron Grin, the Dragon Grin Iron Sworn like kind of mashup, and we got way farther than I thought we were going to.
Right, it can be so easy with other people sometimes.
Yeah, and then this, I was like, well, at least if I could just get some of these things, maybe even a little closer. But I'm like, no, this is pretty. I feel like it's locked in. I have no questions that aren't granular. I have like you've broken down some of the walls, right? Yeah, you're like, I now have roads. I need to get to my next walls, and Yep.
Yeah. There is an Absolute Tabletop Discord. Josh, I believe that's what he's saying. As we are in the Discord sometimes chatting there. You'll see announcements as well. Some cool community stuff happens there. Sometimes we play games. Other people do. But that's worth mentioning as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. This has been fantastic. And I guess we'll end it with a Tabtarian toast.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Here we go. May you mend the first break.
May you kill the first snake. And may you conquer,
everything you undertake.
I think the way to do that is with a breath cue. One and.
So, see, what's funny is because we didn't talk about it that time, I thought, maybe I'll let him say it, but if he doesn't, we're going to do the same pause again. So you're right. I'm like, now that we've talked about it, that's a great way to do it.
So this has been super great. And
thank you everybody for tuning in.
Thanks.
That was amazing. Yeah.
Fantastic.